Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I provide online valuation services for mediation and litigation based in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we are discussing common questions to ask a business broker when selling a business with Jennifer Smith, a business broker in Cape Girardeau, Missouri with Murphy Business Sales. Welcome, Jennifer. They say, okay, now I have to do this small valuation. And I will say your current pricing and traditional pricing is far lower than what you're going to pay for a traditional valuation. So, it's not it is a small fee, but it gets everybody on the same page. When they start that process, are there a couple, again, since it's not a full-blown valuation, what are the documents that they really should bring to that first step?
Yeah, so we're looking at the past 3 years of tax returns for the business. I want a current trailing 12-month P&L and
Profit and loss.
Yes, the profit and loss. And I want a current balance sheet. And based on that, I'll have some additional questions. Sometimes I'll ask to see W-2s, or sometimes I'll ask to see a depreciation schedule or something like that. But really, that last 3 years of tax returns, a trailing 12-month profit and loss, and a balance sheet, that's usually enough to get the conversation started.
Okay, so now we did the valuation. You did the valuation. You came to me and you said, I think I can sell your company for $1 million. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Now what do we do?
So at that point, if the client feels comfortable with it and we feel comfortable with it, I'll prepare an engagement agreement. Everything that we do is via e-signature because we're working in all 4 time zones every day, right? So we're located in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, but only about 20% of the deals that we do would even be considered local. Everything else is outside of our market. So I'll prepare an engagement letter. I'll send it over to you for electronic signature. At that point, we'll start to build what's called a confidential information memorandum, or CIM, C-I-M. And Kate here in our office will prepare that document with the client. And that really goes into a pretty deep dive about the business and anything that we can think of that a buyer might want to know about that company, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we don't want to sugarcoat it, right? Then from there, we're going to prepare a public listing that's very confidential. It's going to say something, for Melissa, if you were a restaurant owner, we would say something like a restaurant doing $3 million in sales in Eastern Missouri. Well, good luck deciding where that restaurant is going to be or who that is, right?
Right.
So that's how we're going to market that blindly and nationally on about 20 different business for sale websites. And if a buyer wants to see that confidential information memorandum, find out the identity of the business and learn a little bit more about them, they're going to have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And so that non-disclosure agreement is binding. And if they let the cat out of the bag and harm the business in any way, then the seller has every right to enforce that non-disclosure. So once we find the buyers, we vet them, and we may go through 2, 3, 5 dozen buyers before they ever meet a seller, because we want to make sure that the buyer is ready, willing, and able to do the deal before we take the seller away from their business and start engaging them in conversations that are going to kind of cause them to lose focus for just a little bit. We want them really focused on maintaining and growing their business while we're going through this process.
And part of that is maybe trying to make sure that these people aren't just trying to figure out who's selling their business, and they maybe have the financial funds to actually buy the business, right?
That's right. We call folks tire kickers, right? They're just the ones that are out. They don't have much to do that day. They're kind of being nosy. Sometimes it's a competitor, and we want to ferret that out and make sure that they never get the confidential information on the business in the first place.
Sure.
Or if they can't afford to do the deal, we see that quite often. Somebody will say, "Well, I've saved up $10,000. I want to buy a business." Okay, well, that's not going to get you very far. So we do a lot of that work on the front end so that we don't have to waste the time of the seller, for sure.
And it's helpful because some of these deals could be done through SBA lending.
Mhm.
So, and we've had some deals that the SBA couldn't fund because the individual who was buying it maybe didn't have a great financial track record in general. So, knowing some of those things at the beginning may prevent issues later on in the process.
That's right. That's right. So, assuming that we find a good qualified buyer who wants to do the deal, or if it's an internal candidate or a family member that you want to sell to, that's fine too. We help with those, and those fees are greatly reduced because we don't have to go find a buyer. But the buyer I'll typically facilitate a buyer-seller meeting, so they can ask questions either in person or maybe via Zoom call of the seller. Once they get comfortable with everything, we'll prepare an offer for the buyer. We'll negotiate that and get the deal under contract. Once it's under contract, we enter what's called a due diligence period. That's an opportunity for the buyer to really look under the hood of the business and ask to see anything that might be a potential deal breaker for them. They'll want to see contracts and employment records. They'll want to see invoices, and they'll have you run QuickBooks reports and talk to the accountant, things like that. Once that process is complete, we help the buyer find the financing, if that's an element of the deal. We're seeing a lot of seller financing right now. But if we're doing external financing, we'll help secure that for the buyer. Then we hire a third-party attorney to draft the closing documents. And that's a really important piece to this because, there's a lot of money spent in hiring a buy-side attorney and a sell-side attorney in a smaller deal. In a bigger deal, that's appropriate. But in a smaller deal, there's a lot of money spent hiring two separate attorneys whose job it is to kind of pull things from one side to the other, right? When we've already negotiated the deal, it's already fair and down the middle, and all we need to do is document that deal. So I hire the third-party attorney to draft the closing documents. I hold escrow. So we don't have to worry about the buyer's funds being with any third party where maybe we can't get it back if a contingency is triggered. Then at that point, we move on to the closing table. We get the deal closed. We release funds in the escrow account, transfer ownership, and walk the buyer through what they need to do to get the business back up and running. So really, and you don't miss a beat at that point. The employees don't know what happened until it happened, right? So they didn't have time to get nervous because we didn't tell anybody. The vendors didn't have time to get nervous and start squirreling around with terms. The competition had absolutely no idea what was happening, so they couldn't get squirrely on you, right? And really, we just kind of emerge with a new owner. Nobody had time to get nervous. The business doesn't miss a beat, and everybody just keeps doing what they're doing. The machine keeps going. So that's really the ideal scenario in a small business sale. Now, things get a lot more complex as we go up the food chain a little bit and we get into lower middle market businesses. But those Main Street businesses call it about 3 to 5 million in enterprise value. That's typically how things work.